Hello and welcome back to Big Photo Boys. This is going to be a little bit of a throwback this episode. I don't know if anyone has been around long enough, if anyone watching or listening was around in the days of my old podcast. I used to do a podcast called the Music Photo Podcast because music photography was my obsession in those days and because no one else was doing it. I had a lot of fun. I reckon I did, I don't know, a dozen, 15, maybe 15 plus episodes. I can't remember. I used to have a different guest every week. I enjoyed it at the time. Like almost everything that I've done with the channel, I regret giving it up. I regret stopping. But this is going to be a little bit of a throwback. I'm on my own today, so I figured this was a good opportunity to go through some of this stuff. I've written down a bunch of stuff that I think is going to be really interesting and useful to someone listening. And it's going to be about the sad realities, the harsh realities of touring and things that I learnt too late, and the good and the bad, and just the truth about it. Before that, just a little catch up on my life. This episode is probably going to go up late Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. It's a bit later than usual. I've had a really busy week, apart from the fact that I have a 5-week-old as of today, and just, the newborn life and routine is pretty hectic. I also was in Sydney for a couple of days for work, and what else? Yesterday I shot a wedding, massive day, but it went really well. And so early this morning I woke up and just went through the session quickly, picked out some highlights, and I like to do like a rush of like 15 to 20 images to the bride and groom, and that just means that they've got something to tide them over, because realistically it's going to take a couple of weeks to get through all the images. I try and deliver by the next weekend if I can, even if it takes some early mornings and a couple of late nights. But I just don't like to have that looming over me. I don't like someone waiting for something from me, and I don't like to have to feel like there's something on my to-do list that's taking me away from the other things that I want to do. So that's that. But here we are. I've actually got a band shoot this afternoon, which is really good. So hopefully I can get this recorded and uploaded before then so it can process on YouTube. But getting a little bit back into doing some band promos, which is good because, like I mentioned, that was sort of my first love. That was what I used to do. That was my obsession in photography. So it's fun to start doing that stuff again. Anyway, let's get into the episode. So I think as we all get into music photography, we dream about going on tour with our favorite bands because, let's be honest, the lifestyle just looks fun. And it is fun. I don't know how fun it is to do full-time or how fun it is to do for an extended period of time. I've never done it with a wife and family. I did it in my younger days, and I never really did, a heap of touring. I did a bunch of Australian tours. I did one really good US tour, and I'm so grateful to have had those experiences, and I'm so grateful that I got to give it a try, and now I know what I'm missing out on, and I'm comfortable with what I'm missing out on, so I don't always, now that I have Gem and Zig, I'm not always thinking about that life or looking to my friends who are in that world of touring musicians, touring photographers, sound engineer, all that stuff. And, I'm happy for them, but I'm also happy where I'm at in my life. So first of all, I have got to say that 99% of the photographers that I know, possibly more, don't get paid or don't get paid enough to make a living on tour. And that's not, I don't think that's me being negative. If there's anyone that wants to correct me, feel free. But in my experience, almost no one is getting paid, or no one's getting paid good money on tour. For the most part, it's a working holiday. So, if you get your expenses paid and you can eat every day, and if you're lucky, maybe you have a little bit of extra spending money, that's how it always worked for me. I never really got paid. I never really got paid much. I didn't end up after a tour with more money than I left, put it that way. Having said that, I got to have some fabulous experiences, like some things that I'll never forget for as long as I live, and things that, I'm still talking about to this day because of how just memorable and just, the reason that we do it, in my opinion, the reason we do it as photographers is that we get to sort of feel like a bit of a rock star ourselves in a way. Kurt and I have a joke that we've mentioned on the podcast before, that all music photographers are failed musicians. Whether that means you actually learned an instrument and played an instrument and, it didn't work out with your own band, that's not necessarily what I'm talking about. I just mean that might have been a dream at some point. You might have loved music so much. It might have been a dream to feel what it was like to be on stage, or to play with your favorite bands, or to travel, for the sake of music. And the reality is most of us don't get to do that. So as photographers, we get to feel like we're a part of that world. We get to kind of live that secondhand through the bands that we travel with. And don't get me wrong, that's really cool. I understand. I totally get why so many people want to do it. So many local kids take up photography and they start shooting bands, and they want to jump on any little tour or weekender or whatever that they can get. Totally understand that. But for the most part, in my opinion, the best that you can hope for is a working holiday. So it's a little bit different. The world of touring in Australia is a little bit different to like USA or Europe. Not that I've been to Europe on a tour, but just from all of the experiences that I've seen and, heard from close friends. I have a handful of close friends that have toured a lot and continue to. And it's a complete different beast. The problem with Australia is we're so spread out over here. We've got cities, our major cities are all on the east coast. Then we've got Perth on the west coast, and we've got South Australia at the bottom. Hardly ever do bands do any other cities than that. You have to be pretty special to be selling out regional towns, or to be traveling to, Northern Territory, or there's certainly no bands traveling to Central Australia, that's for sure. Tasmania very rarely as well. So to be honest, when I think about it, and when someone says they're doing an Australian tour, as sad as it is, an Australian tour is usually Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane. Just 3 shows. You can do it in one weekend. It's kind of unbelievable when you compare it to America. Like in America, you guys have 50 states or whatever, and every state might have 2 or 3 major cities that you can play. So in theory, you could tour indefinitely in America. When I was there, I think we did 35 shows in 37 days, something like that. We started down south on the East Coast, all the way up to New York, and across down the West Coast and into the South, and then back across to the East. But really, depending on your fan base, depending on your genre, I suppose as well, you could tour for 6 months and probably still not scratch the surface. I suppose you'd play all the major venues, but there are still, if all you're doing is trying to take your music to new people, you could just keep going and going and going. And I suppose Europe's like that as well, because Europe has lots of small countries in a small amount of space. And I imagine in every country, there's going to be several major cities that can support a show that would be profitable for a band. Again, depending on the genre, depending on the taste of the people in that area. But yeah, it's crazy to think about when you compare it with Australia. Like Victoria, where I live, which is not even, I don't think it's one of the biggest states. I think New South Wales, WA, maybe most of the states are bigger than Victoria. I can think of you might play a show in Melbourne, and then if you're a big enough band, you might do Geelong, maybe like a Bendigo or something, like the regional towns. Yeah, there's not really a lot of value, to be honest, for a touring company, for a booking agent to book shows out there, because I just think the population doesn't support it. The numbers just don't add up. Anyway, so a tour of the country can be Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane. It's a bit sad. If you've got money, I feel like you go to South Australia as well, because that's usually a flight. If it's not a flight, it's a very miserable drive from Brisbane to South Australia, or you go, Melbourne to Adelaide to Sydney to Brisbane, I suppose. And again, that's a miserable drive. And if you've got a lot of money, you go to Perth, but that's a flight. No one would ever drive that. That's it just doesn't make sense. So think about that. An extended Australian tour might be 5 cities. You'd have to have money. The band would have to have money before the tour to book something like that. Anyway, I thought I'd just get that off my chest first, because we might have people overseas listening and that wouldn't understand the way Australia works. Speaking to some of my American friends, I remember when we were in the US and explaining how Australia is and what it's like to tour in Australia, they were just like, that's not worth it. You have to drive 10 hours between shows. That's not sustainable. It's not profitable. And quite frankly, we wouldn't be a band if we had to drive 10 hours between shows. But power to all the Australian bands and photographers and everyone doing it, because it is a grind, and it's fun, but it's certainly not for the faint of heart. So let's talk about how to make money on tour. I think this is a really cool topic, and this is stuff that I've learned from other photographers or managers or tour managers. And the truth is, I can only really relate this to the one, for me, it was a big tour that I did in the US. I'm going to relate this to that and what I learned from some of the people over there, or what I figured out on my own. Sometimes it was, adapting something that I've seen from someone else. But basically, what I can say to start off is, on the road, everyone has a hustle. Everyone is trying to work out a way to make money on the road, because in a touring party, from, I don't know where it comes from, the label, from the booking agent, whatever, every band member and hopefully every crew member will get what's called a PD. It's a per diem, and I think that just means per day. So every day in the morning, I suppose, you get an envelope with some money in it, and that's sort of your spending money for the day. Basically, it should be enough money just to get you through whatever small expenses you have, food, maybe a little bit of spending money. It's your budget for the day. And it's generally not a lot of money. In my experience, it might be like, I don't know, $20 to $100. If someone wants to correct me, if I'm way off on there, let me know in the comments below. But from my experience, a per diem is not a lot of money. It's a couple of meals, and if you're clever, you can put some aside and start to stack it up over the day, so that when you want to do something, when you're in a city that you want to do something cool, or you want to eat at a fancier restaurant, or you want to stay in a hotel just to recharge, that you have a little bit of extra cash to do that. But yeah, it's really not, it's not a lot of money. It's just to get you through the day. So every person has a hustle. Every person's trying to work out some way to make cash. Merch guys will have like a tips jar or a tips box, because they're providing a service. That's sort of part of the American culture, is that when someone provides a service to you, you give them a tip. Do I agree with it? Not really. Does it work? I suppose. It's an interesting part of touring. and I think the merch generally goes to them. Sorry, the merch tips generally go to the merch guy, not the band. So the first little hustle is merch guys will write some witty thing to ask for a tip, and depending on what they write or their personality or how they do their job, that's how they get tips. Okay, not really relevant to photographers, I understand, but I'm getting to that. So on the merch stand is usually merch for every band will have their own little trestle table, and I think even venues take a cut of merch as well, which is a bit sad, but it is what it is. One really cool thing that I've seen is offering little extras at the merch stand that maybe set you aside from the other bands and can make different people in the party a little bit of extra cash every single day. So for example, a band, like a drummer, might sign a drum skin, an old drum head, or do a bit of art and sell that as like a one-off piece. I know Goose from Every Time I Die, he would do, he was playing in Norma Jean when I was on that tour, and he would do some drawings on his drum heads, sign them and sell them at the merch desk for whatever, $50. If you're a fan, that's awesome. That's a great deal. Something hand signed, you probably get to go and meet Goose and you get to take home, hang it on your wall. Great. So the photography version of that, and I'm pretty sure I got this from Bryce Hall, not the TikToker. Where's Bryce, I think is his Instagram handle, and he tours with Motionless in White. And what he does is every day he has a little Fuji Instax camera, and he'll take, Polaroids of Motionless in White or Ice Nine Kills or whatever band that he was touring with at the time. Throughout the day, he'll take half a dozen, 10 shots, let's say one packet of film, 10 shots of a band, individual members, groups, live photos, behind the scenes, whatever. And then he'll get the band member to sign that particular photo. And I'm pretty sure he wasn't selling them for much. It might be like $15 to $20 each or something. Maybe a little bit more, I'm not sure. But think about it, like if you're buying a packet of film for whatever it costs, $15, $20, there's 10 instant shots in there. That's a really good rate of return. If you can sell them for 20, 25, 30, I don't know what he charged. Let's say you get $20 to $25 each. That's 10 times the investment that you've put in. It doesn't take too long to snap a couple of behind the scenes pictures. They're not a masterpiece, but the beauty of it is that is a unique one-off piece of art that fan gets to collect, and they get to say, I was at this show, I got this Polaroid, it's signed by so-and-so, and how cool is that? That is such a good idea. If I was touring, that is definitely something that I would be doing. You could even, I think that the charm of it is that it's a complete one-off because you can't print the Instax thing again. But I did recently get a Fuji Instax printer, so theoretically I could print photos that I take in on my phone or digital camera or whatever, print them off, sign those. I don't know ethically if you could be happy with saying that it's a one-off, but I suppose you don't have to mention it. It's just an instant photo signed by a band member, a cool little moment, and in theory you could use any shot. You don't actually even have to do the extra work of shooting it on an instant camera. Love that one. Absolutely love that one. Here's something that I've done on my Australian tour. So when I was very young, the first the first good tour that I did was with a band in Sydney at the time called the Sweet Apes, touring with the Red Jumpsuit Apparatus. And I think there was maybe 5 shows across Australia, a couple of regional, no, maybe more, I can't remember. It was over like a week and a half. A few regional dates as well. Coffs Harbour, Newcastle, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide? I can't remember. And maybe Perth, but I didn't go to Perth. So what the band didn't have any money. I love them. I love those guys to absolute bits. Like I owe so much of who I am and what I've been able to do in photography to my time with the Sweet Apes and my relationships with those guys. But they were broke as. They were touring in a Tarago. I can't even remember if they had a trailer. They were just all jammed into a Tarago, which is just like a little like a soccer mum van. It was really old and it was ghetto. Like, it was really a basic setup. Okay, so they didn't have much money to pay me. And so what they would do instead is Mickey from the band, who is one of the best networkers that I've ever met. Mickey would text ahead or put out a message on Facebook to the openers of each show, and he would basically say, hey, we're coming to town today. We're bringing PJ. PJ's a really good photographer. Do you want a mini band shoot for $50, $100, whatever it was? I think I used to literally do them for $50. It'd be like a 10-minute shoot, go out somewhere behind the venue. I brought a little strobe and a softbox with me, and very quick shoot, one look, a few different final images. Very easy to do, and I don't know why we didn't do it more, because at the time, an extra $50 in your pocket for the next couple of days meant a lot. It meant that, we could eat at a nice restaurant as opposed to just getting like shitty takeaway food or eating noodles at the venue or whatever. So looking back on that, it would be such a no-brainer. So particularly if I had any sort of reputation at that point, all I was doing was relying on the Sweet Apes reputation and relying on Mickey's sweet talking to get me the jobs. I think I only did one or two. But if you're a photographer with any sort of reputation, it would be very, very easy to offer $100 to a couple of local bands. Commercial photographers, by the way, right now listening to this are probably laughing at how small these dollar amounts are. But when you're in that lifestyle, when you're like, I was probably in my early 20s at the time. I can't remember when this was. It must have been 8 years ago or something. However you can get money in your hand is so valuable for the tour. It improves your experience so much. So $50 here, $100 here, like that actually means the world. So if you can trade a 10-minute shoot and then 15 minutes of editing for $50, like, it doesn't seem like much, but it's a no-brainer. Anyway, if you have a little bit of a reputation yourself, I do not think it would be hard to book one or two on every single date, and you hit up the opening bands, you say who you are, who you're touring with. I'm in town for one day. This is my portfolio. You guys are all going to be here. You're all going to be dressed and ready. Before you guys go out, let's just duck into the green room or out the back of the venue, take a few shots, and you'll have some sweet new promos. That's an absolute no-brainer for bands, and I don't know why I didn't do that more. That is such a good idea. Another one is, again, it might seem obvious, but I think most people don't have the balls to sell themselves in this way. I know I certainly didn't, but again, that was just because I was young and inexperienced, and I really understand it a bit better now. Is that when you are part of a touring group, you become really close with all the other bands. If it's a good tour and if the other bands are cool, generally you make really good friends with everyone on the tour. And not everyone on the tour will bring a photographer. Maybe the bigger band will, maybe one of the smaller bands will. But let's say you've got 3 to 5 bands on this touring lineup. In the case of America, there were 2 photographers on the tour. And Jonathan Kemp, also a music photographer. I don't think he does much of it anymore, but he was really clever in that he would shoot for the band that he was touring with, but he was so personable enough and his reputation was good enough that he could take some photos for some of the other bands and get some cash from some of the bigger bands. So let's say you might only be getting like $50 a day from the band that you're with, or maybe you get a little per diem or something. But if you could supply 2 other bands on the tour, it wouldn't take that much effort to snap, to shoot 3 songs of 2 different bands every night. And then it wouldn't take much effort. So that might take 15 minutes to shoot each band, let's say half an hour for 2 bands. It might be 15 minutes to pick, again, just like, 15 shots, let's say, 10, 15 shots for each, deliver them to the band. They've got content for the next day, to charge $50 for that. If the band is worth their salt, that would just come straight out of merch and it wouldn't even make a dent. So yeah, it requires a little bit of confidence. You have to sell yourself a little bit, but if you can make friends with the other bands on tour and perhaps approach a tour manager and just say, hey, I'd be willing to put in a little bit of extra work. Here's a sample of what I've done. I'm going to shoot your band, $50. I'll deliver you 15 shots a day and you've got something to post. And I think it's a no-brainer. I think most bands will jump at the opportunity. Certainly most clever tour managers would be happy to take up that deal. I don't know if I can really give good advice. I haven't thought about this enough and written anything down about how to get on tour. I'm going to have to have a think about it because I'm sure I could work out, trace my path back or talk to some friends, because I know there would be people listening that would love to try out the touring life and would love to know how to get on tour. I'm not going to cover that here, but what I want to talk about is how to stay on tour, because one of the most important things is to make the most of the opportunities that you're given. And what I mean by that is it's really important to make friends and to extend your network within the music community, because everybody knows everyone. And if you're a good music photographer, one tour should lead you to the next tour because you've provided so much value, or you've made the connections with other bands on the bill, and they can in the future look to you and say, we really like what you did for this. Can we take you out for this run? So how to stay on tour. That's the first one, obviously, is networking. I'm not even going to count that as a tip. That's so obvious. But here's something that I think is an original idea. I've never heard anyone else talk about this before. I think it's something that I've come up with. And truthfully, I decided at a point in my life that I didn't want to do the touring thing anymore. That's beside the point right now. But if I did want to continue touring, I think probably the most important thing that I would do is learn an auxiliary skill, learn another skill that I could bring to a tour that would increase my stocks, that would increase my value as a bunk on a bus, or the cost of a plane ticket to a label, or basically if you're there taking up space, you're costing someone money, or if you're not costing someone money, you're costing someone the opportunity of bringing someone else more useful on a tour. So the best advice that I can give is learn another skill. That could be something like cutting hair. A friend of mine, Harley, who was on the American tour, he wasn't charging money for it, but he, I think, was a trained hairdresser or barber. So every second week or something, he'd get out a little chair, pull out the clippers, he'd wrap a towel around, and he'd do haircuts for all the guys on tour. So useful. Again, that could be a good little hustle. You could just charge, I don't know, $10, $15 for a haircut, just for one of your mates, for some of the guys in the other bands. He just did it for free. But how much more valuable is it as a sound guy if you can also give haircuts to everyone on tour? Because on tour you get so dirty and scruffy, and your personal grooming starts to lack, and it is annoying to have to find a barber somewhere that you've never tried before. You don't know if you can trust them. I know I'm fussy with my hair. Anyway, How cool is that? That is such a good idea. Learn another skill. Even if you don't master it, if you could learn the basics of cutting hair, even just how to use a pair of clippers, if you're not familiar with scissors, I really think that would go a long way. Or if you're a barber, anyway, I won't go into that actually. But the other one that I thought of was massages. It might sound really weird, but if you could, pack a massage table under the bus and you had a bit of experience, like let's say you've done a little course, a myotherapy or something like that. If you actually knew what you were doing to give massages, think of how valuable that would be on a tour. Literally driving all day, playing shows, your neck, your back, sitting in plain chairs alone. I mean, just after a week of tour, your body is ruined, or at least mine was. I know I have my own issues as it is, but just it's actually so hard on your body. I don't know how people do this, continuously, because the lack of sleep, just like, again, cramming yourself into cars, planes, sleeping on bunks, sleeping in a moving vehicle, it's so bad for your neck and back. Like, it would be such a no-brainer. If you had two photographers that were equally good, but one of them was really good at giving massages. And I mean, talk about networking. Imagine rolling up, early to a venue. Everyone's pulling in, sound checking, whatever. You lay out the massage table and you offer massages to the bands on the bill. Like, what an awesome way to network. I realize how random this might sound, but tell me that's not a great idea, and tell me that wouldn't make you extremely valuable as a member of the touring party. Other examples might be like cooking or teching, if you can change the strings on the guitar, or if you know how to, what's it called? What's the person at the side of stage that does like the in-ear monitors? Is it a monitor engineer? Anyway, if you have a second skill like that, no brainer. They're going to bring you along, 100%. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up now because it's getting too long. But here are things that I have learnt too late. I've sort of touched on a couple of these, I think, already. But I'm going to run through them quickly because I think it's really important. The first thing is bands need shots almost immediately on a tour. You don't need to deliver 2,000 images, but that night, or if not that night, definitely by the next morning, you should have 15 to 20 shots minimum to a band that they can use to promote the next day's shows. This is something that I learned too late for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because when I started doing all of this, Instagram wasn't a big thing like it is now. And secondly, computers weren't a big thing like they are now. That's an awkward way to put that, but what I mean is, like, none of us really knew how to use Lightroom, or the systems that we used were really clunky and slow and bulky as well. So the first handful of tours that I didn't even bring a laptop. I mean, apart from the fact that they were just over a long weekend, I would shoot the whole thing, and then a few days later, then I would edit the photos and send them to the band. And looking back now, no one ever complained because, I mean, I didn't get paid, so how could they complain? But the bands really need them the next morning to promote the show for that night. If you can make a show look really cool and then you get 5 people, 10 people extra down because they have good content to promote the show in the city that they're doing that night, then that is so valuable. So you need to deliver almost immediately. Don't overdo it. If you can just go through quickly, and to be honest, if you're good enough, if you can not overshoot, and once you get the shots that are good, if you can just leave it there, head straight into the green room, chuck a quick edit on them, that's usually enough in my opinion. Secondly, it's actually less about the performance than you think. Most cities that you go to will have a hand, any good gig will have a handful of photographers covering the show regardless, whether they're just kids that have just rocked up with a camera, or there's a local magazine, online publication, or something like that that sent people out. Most shows will have photographers there already. The difference is a couple of things. Firstly, the access to the images. You don't know, it's sort of a bit of a grey area using someone else's images, or definitely asking someone else for images, and you don't know when they're going to be delivered. So as the touring photographer, your advantage is you get the photos to the artist first, and then they're going to post your photos before anyone else's, even if someone else's photos are better than yours. But secondly, you get a special access to the band that the touring photographers don't have. You have a different relationship with the band, so the band will probably allow you to photograph them in ways that the other photographers won't get. If you're in the photo pit, the band might come and interact with you. That is something that they won't do with other photographers. Or you just might literally just get more access to the venue. You might be able to go backstage and do a quick portrait, or you can shoot a cool shot of unloading the van, or someone falling asleep and the other band members pranking that person. You just get this special access, and that is the most important thing. The most important thing is not to get the perfect punk jump, or to make sure the lighting is the best that it can in the actual performance shots, because truthfully, there are a lot of photographers around that can take good photos at a show, but your point of difference is everything else that they don't have. All right, and lastly, a lot of touring photographers get lumped into doing video as well. And I've been here trying to switch between both on the same camera during the same gig. It's an absolute nightmare. But if you do need to deliver some form of video every day, actually, I suppose this works for photos as well, but the best thing you can do if you need to, shoot, edit, and deliver consistently every day over a long period of time is you need to create a formula. For the shows, it might be, okay, I need 5 backstage photos, I need 5 on-stage photos, I need 1 group photo, and I need something specific to that town. So let's say that adds up to 20 different shots. You need to, during the day, say, okay, make a mental note when you take a photo, okay, this is a good backstage shot, and then during this part of the song, I know I can get this. Anyway, for photos, it's probably a bit easier. For video, it's harder to think that way, but you need to shoot knowing what the edit is going to look like. So if you need to deliver a little promo video each day, you might know that you start every video with a shot outside the window from the van of the world going past. You're rolling into a new city. Then the next shot is the boys loading in and, setting up. The next shot is the crowd going wild, the band interacting with the crowd. And then the next shot is the band all sweaty, taking a bow, leaving the stage. Like, if you can lay it out that way, it takes out so much of the thought process and so much of the stress of editing video, because you shoot the shots knowing where the shots are going to be used. And then when it comes to editing, you don't just have to dig through footage and footage and footage and footage and footage. I promise you that will make such a big difference. Okay, I'm going to leave it there because otherwise I'll never get this video up. I'm sorry for rambling. It's what I do. Kurt, come back. I need you, buddy. I miss you. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this and you would like to see more content like this related back to music photography like the good old days, please leave a thumbs up on this video and a thoughtful comment down below. It really does help to get that algorithm ticking along. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye.